Shri Mahaganadhipataye Namaha. Sadashivasamārambhām Shankaracārya madhyamām Asmadacārya paryantāṃ Vande Guru Paraṁparāṃ. Bhūrambhāṃ syanalo nilombara maharnatho Himamshuh puman ityabhati characharatmakam yasyaiva murtyashtakam nānyat kinchana vidyate vimrushatam yasmat parasmat vibhoh tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye nama idam Shri Daksinamurtaye. We have seen in the earlier verse that the human being, Purushaha, Paribhramitaha, entirely deluded in taking what the mind presents to be real. And so he ends up seeing the Dvaitam, the duality whole life, not realizing that the duality is only relative to the body, the mind and the senses. So when you look through the glass of the mind and the senses, what you see is the duality. And therefore duality is not the real. And so person doesn't realize that. And then ends up dividing the entire creation into the opposites. Like Karya versus Karana, a pair of opposites. Swa versus Swami, that is also opposites. Sishya versus Acharya, everything is a pair of opposites. Pitru versus Putra is also a pair of opposites. In fact, entire creation is in the form of opposites. Entire creation. So this is how we end up looking at the opposites and assuming that the opposites are real, and then get connected to the opposites, get bound to the opposites. When you are attached to one of the opposites, naturally you will be averse to the other. This is how the attachment and the aversion are like ropes, the mental ropes that tie us firmly to the things of the world. The more things that we get attached to, so the more things that we become averse to, the more bound that we are. So this is how it is happening. And a question is asked, Katham evam vidha maya nivartete ti pruchyataha. A little more. Ishvaropasana rupaha tadupaya prakirtitaha. So this maya, how can it be overcome? That is that question. Yesterday I mentioned it, but again I am mentioning. The upaya is the worship, mental worship of Ishvara. You see, in Vedanta, the worship of Ishvara is mainly mental. The physical worship has its place, but we are not dealing with Karmakanda. We have left Karmakanda behind, and then even Upasana Kanda is also left behind, and we have come to Jnana Kanda. Therefore, we have to take a step back. That will be into the Upasana. Therefore, Ishvara Upasana Rupaha. Even in Gita, in 12th chapter, Bhagavan asks us to pursue Upasana, Saguna Upasana. So, Mayi Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya, so Ananya Yogena, Mam Dhyayanta Upasate. Whatever actions that we perform, we surrender them to Ishvara, and our upasana, our worship is mainly mental, upasana, and meditative. Dhyayantaha upasate. That is the main worship. That is the primary worship. of the Vedanta students, primary worship. There may be some karma here and there, especially the Nitya karma. Other than the Nitya karma, the rest of the bulk of the Kamya karmas can be entirely set aside. And so you are now left with the Nitya karmas, which are always very simple and they do not demand much of energy. Nitya karmas are like that. They are simple duties. You devote your energy, conserved that way, to mental worship, meditative worship. So that has to be done. And then this upasana is of two kinds. One is upasana which is in the form of a vision, and means you visualize like that. That is all the upasana is. And another upasana is in the form of a discipline. Means early morning and also in the evening, whenever you find time, especially those times, you meditate. That is the disciplinary or upasana in the form of the discipline. So you meditate, there are a few kinds of meditation, whatever meditation. You have to study that subject separately and you have to perform meditation. And so, in fact, meditation is not an act, but still we talk like that. In speech we say you have to do meditation. And so, you may pursue guided meditation. That will be very comfortable. But then, here in this verse, it is not just meditation that is limited to an optimum time of half an hour in a given session. Maybe twice a day, half an hour, half an hour. Even if you extend it, you can extend it maybe by 45 minutes, up to 45 minutes, or even 1 hour. So, per day, 2 hours meditation is quite a substantial meditation. So, therefore, the rest of the life is there. So, you have to maintain that vision in the rest of the life. Therefore, the meditation, which is in the upasana, which is in the form of a vision. So upasana means upa-asanam. You commune with Ishvara. Upa is close, asanam abiding. That is the communion. So you commune with Ishvara. So this communion with Ishvara is of two kinds, which is upasana. One is the vision, the upasana in the form of the vision, which is described in this verse. And the upasana, which is in the form of the discipline of meditation, which you are advised to do. So that vision we are now looking at. So this entire universe, characharam idam, characharatmakam idam. So this jagat is in the form of chara and achara. When you have the atma there, it is in the form characharatmakam idam. Characharatmakam means charachara rupam. Atma, it has multiple meanings. So charachara rupam. You look around, so now in this vision, you restrict yourself to you do not restrict yourself to the life forms alone. There are certain upasanas which are restricted to life forms alone. But here it is not life forms alone. The entire universe is included now. Chara and achara. When you say Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hurdeshe Arjuna Tishtati, in such a context, the upasana is focused on all life forms. Whereas here, it is the vision is about the entire universe. That's why that point is brought out by the expression Characharatmakam. So, and this the main purpose of the upasana is to neutralize the ego. That point should be kept in mind. If that point is not paid attention to, then you end up doing the opposite. The whole thing becomes counterproductive. So, like people proclaim that they are this upasaka, that upasaka, like that, they print in the newspapers also. So the person says, Gayatri upasaka, such and such. Like that. Suppose I come out and say, Shri Vidyopasaka, Swami Tattvavidananda Saraswati. Like that. So, So now that is what is called a spiritual ego. There is a name for it. It is the spiritual ego. It is the most dangerous ego yet. So that is not the purpose of upasana. This is a precaution. Because you look at the world and come out with a precaution, So we have done this much upasana, that much upasana. So the upasana should be secret. Suppose you are chanting a mantra, Shatkarna Hato Mantraha. If the mantra is known to for 6 years, it is already spoiled. 6 years. The mantra, the instructor, he has 2 years, and when he gives the mantra, he hears that. And when you recite it also, he hears it. And when the mantra is instructed, the student hears that. So 4 years are accounted for. Years are these, 4 are accounted for. If you tell this mantra to another pair of years, already the mantra is destroyed. Shatkarna Hato Mantraha. Like that they say. Suppose if you put it in the newspaper that you are chanting Gayatri Mantra and all that. So now you can understand the meaning of that. Therefore, you should not use the upasana to build the ego. In fact, this is how we miss the whole thing. In fact, you should use it to neutralize the ego. So, that is one important precaution in the context of any upasana. And also, this upasana is like a blueprint. When somebody is in the prison, a blueprint is given to him. Using that blueprint, he can come out of the prison. So, the upasana is like that. It is not meant for, suppose you give the prison blueprint to the person inside the prison. He uses it to establish a racket within the prison. That is not the purpose. That the whole purpose is defeated. Similarly, this upasana is a blueprint, kind of a blueprint of the prison, and it helps you to come out of the prison. Therefore, you should not use it to build something within the samsara. You should not use it for benefits of within the samsara. That is not the purpose of the upasana. In a different context, upasanas may be like that. They are called kamyopasanas. We are not looking at it. Here we give the blueprint of the prison and a method to come out of the prison. That is the upasana. So, and the upasana is like when a person has fallen into waters, because the samsara is an ocean. So, samsaram sagaram dukkham. It's an ocean. And so, therefore, if you swim well, you will be able to reach the shore. That is the idea. And the upasana it serves such a purpose. And therefore, this is the upasana. So, idam jagat. And this jagat is characharatmakam. The moving and the non-moving. Moving means the animals, birds, humans, etc. And non-moving, you can put trees and other jada, the insentient objects of the universe. They are broadly classified as chara and achara. You see, the trees also have some movement in them, and the piece of stone also has movement inside. Particles and atoms and molecules move. You should not look at it like that. So broadly, there are forms, there are objects in the universe which move, and there are also objects which do not move. This is not about life and non-life. This is about movement and not moving, moving and non-moving. So chara and achara. So that covers sentient and insentient. Entire universe is now covered. This universe is indeed a manifest form of Ishvara, who has manifested in the eightfold universe, manifested as the eightfold universe, Murtyashtakam, eight forms. You see, this upasana is called Sagunopasana. The upasanas in the Vedas, they are all Sagunopasana, like Gayatri Upasana. You stand before the rising sun and offer oblations, whatever offer you offer, and recite the Gayatri mantra. This is not sakara. There is no akara in that. Nowhere you find akara. You have to really add akara to it using a Puranic verse. Otherwise, in itself, you don't find akara. It is sagunopasana. Similarly, suppose namaste vayo tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi, I mentioned it, an upasana, which can be part of the pranayama. That is also sagunopasana. Vayu is the saguna manifest form of Ishvara, but no akara. Saguna and then sakara. Saguna could be nirakara, saguna nirakara, or saguna could be sakara, saguna sakara. Nirguna cannot have two categories like that. Nirguna is necessarily nirakara. You need not even say that. Nirguna is one thing. In nirguna, it is jnanam. In saguna, it is upasana. You cannot have the other way. In nirguna, there is no upasana, because nirguna includes the jiva. Therefore, you abide in the nirguna atma. Whereas if you want to worship, mental worship, that is upasana, then it cannot be nirguna. It is saguna. Therefore, upasana is necessarily saguna. You may still find an expression nirguna upasana. That expression could be there. So it is not, I am not contesting the expression. In that context, if you find an expression nirguna upasana, it only means that you abide in the nirguna atma tattvam. That is the meaning of that. Upasana is necessarily saguna, of saguna. And being saguna, it could be sakara or it could be nirakara. And here it is nirakara. There is no form. I mean, there is no physical, akara is not there. And so there are 8 forms, 8 aspects of the saguna, 8 aspects. You can still say murti, but it is saguna nirakara. You have to keep that in mind. And even in murta brahmanam, the Parameshwara is presented as 5-fold, murta and amurta. Their murta is not akara. The prithvi, apaha, tejas. They don't have akara. But they can be seen. There is no particular shape or form to Prithvi. But still it is called Murta. So, suppose you make a form, Prithvi Devata, Bhudevi. So, in Venkateshwara temple, there is Venkateshwara, on either side you have Shri Devi, Bhudevi. That Bhudevi is the Sakara. Okay, that is not what we are talking here. Here Prithvi is the manifest form of Ishvara. When we say it is not Saguna Sakara, Bhudevi is the Saguna Sakara. Here it is Saguna Nirakara. Because Prithvi has no particular form here. And you have to really superimpose a form to make it Bhudevi worshipped in a temple. That is different. Here it is. That's why this is not temple worship. It is the Jagat is the temple. The entire universe is the temple. And Ishvara is obtaining in this temple of the universe in 8 forms, which are saguna, not akara. Okay? Very clear? Just I am making it more clear. So, generally, saguna is taken as outside manifestation of Ishvara, and nirguna is taken as antaryami, inner. So that is the general principle. And so these are the 8 forms. Yasyaiva murtyashtakam. And what are these 8 forms? Bhuh, Pruthivi is the first form. You see, in this vision, Ishvara, who is supposed to be Paroksha, you know, if he is in Kailasa or Vaikuntha, he remains Paroksha, indirect. Now that Paroksha Ishvara is brought into Pratyaksha. You can see with your eyes Ishvara. That Saguna form of Ishvara can be seen with the eyes. So that is the important development from Paroksha to Pratyaksha that is found in this Upasana. In a different kind of Upasana, suppose you do, say, Lakshmi Upasana. And then, so you contemplate upon the form of the Lakshmi, and with the Lakshmi mantra, etc. And where is Lakshmi? Lakshmi is in Vaikuntha. So that is Paroksha Upasana it is. This is not Paroksha, this is Pratyaksha Upasana. Therefore, it is all the more significant because of its directness of approach. And then Bhuhu. So the earth is the direct manifest form of Ishvara. Bhuhu. So you have to look at it like that. If this vision, so what happens is, there is a vision, and the one who has the vision is called Rishi. So Rishi has a vision, and one step down you come down, fall down. I was hesitating to say fall down. Okay, I have said it already. You fall down one step. Now the vision is not there, you are left with a ritual. And one more step fall down, you neither have the vision nor the ritual associated with that vision. You only have some academic knowledge. That is the second step of fall down. So, like you see, under this first step of fall down itself is fraught with some dangers. Like Pruthivi, you see Pruthivi. Now, Pruthivi is the manifest form of Ishvara. Therefore, when you look at Pruthivi, there is a sense of devotion. In fact, when we wake up in the morning, we say, Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Padasparsham Kshamasvame. Like that we make a prayer. I like that prayer. So early morning when we wake up, so before putting the feet on the earth, on the floor, we say this prayer. O Bhudevi, you are the consort of Lord Vishnu, and I am prostrating unto you. Please bear with my stamping upon you. So, a great vision. So, this is the vision of the Rishi. The vision of the Rishi is Pruthivi. And now, so if you want to make a building on the Pruthivi, you have to dig up the Pruthivi. And therefore there is a ritual to atone for that. You worship the Pruthivi and take permission from the Pruthivi that you are digging it up. And then dig up. And if you have to till the land to grow crops, then again there is a prayer. Oh Pruthivi, I am digging, I am drawing lines upon your surface. Thereby I don't know whether I am hurting you, but please excuse me, I cannot help it, I have to produce crops. So there is a prayer like that. And now I told you another prayer. When you get down from the bed, you make a prayer. So this is the kind of sensibility that is incorporated in that vision. You are very sensible. The Pruthivi is looked at as live. You are very sensible. So that's upasana makes you very sensible. Suppose you miss that upasana, or you fall down from the level of upasana to the ritual. Now in the ritual what we do? We make a form of that Pruthivi, call it Bhudevi or whatever, some form. Pruthivi Devata you can call, Bhudevi you can call, and the form must be feminine only. It cannot be masculine because the words are like that. There is no feminine or masculine associated with Pruthivi as such in Saguna. In Saguna there is no gender. Only in Sakara there will be a gender. So you come down from the vision to the Sakara and then make a form and worship that form. Now you lose all sensibility. So you dig up the earth, you stop all other prayers associated with that sensibility of earth being the manifest form of Ishvara. All that sensibility is lost, and now you are stuck with a ritual. So a form you prepare and put it there and perform a ritual and wash off your hands. This is the danger associated with a Saguna Sakara worship in which the vision is missing. And so what happens? There may be an industrialist. This is we see in India all the time. There is a place called Patancheru near Hyderabad. It is a laboratory for land, water and air pollution. That Patancheru is a laboratory. Because the entire village, a sprawling village, It is the most polluted place on the planet Earth. We have a very dubious distinction in Hyderabad because in Hyderabad is the center of pharmaceutical industry. It has a few distinctions. Like, for example, Hyderabad, it produces maximum amount of quinolone antibiotics, that is the cephalosporin antibiotics, in the world. That is a distinction. And one more distinction is, it is the Patancheru near Hyderabad is the most polluted place on the planet Earth. And people from Japan and Europe, etc., when they want to study all three pollutions at one place, wonderful laboratory you have, they want to study it, they come to Patancheru. And the industrialists there, they make good money. They live in Banjara, in a posh locality. They make good money. They don't care for treating the effluents, and so the pollution control board is dysfunctional, and therefore they pollute. And then what they do, they go and worship Bhudevi, Sridevi, Sameta Venkateshwara Swami. They go and worship. Did you follow the point I am making? I am a bit critical, please excuse me. So I am not criticizing anybody. I am just looking at a phenomenon in which when the vision is replaced by the ritual, ritual with vision is wonderful, but vision is replaced by the ritual, it is fraught with such dangers that we lose that sensibility. We become very insensitive, and of course greed makes us very insensitive. By hook or crook we have to make money. It doesn't matter whether you pollute a river. Recently, Apaha, I am coming to that also, Apaha. All water bodies are manifest God, manifest forms of God. So that is the vision, a rishi. Now the ritual. In the ritual, you are not interested in the manifest form of God and all that. In the ritual, you take a ceremonial bath, and it doesn't matter whether you are polluting the river or whatever. And the Indian Pollution Control Board, just yesterday I was reading the news, just yesterday, it has released a list of 150 rivers which are very badly polluted. 150 rivers in India. Now what other rivers are left which are not polluted? That figure he did not give in that news item. And the list is released, and maximum number of those rivers, the highest number are found in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Almost every river got polluted. Therefore, we say Ganga Mata, but we are the worst polluters of the river Ganga. What is this contradiction? The contradiction is we do not have the vision with us anymore. We are stuck with a ritual that has its origin in the vision. The river Thames, which passes through the London, which is the highly populous city, a megapolis it is. And river Thames passes through the London city. Entire river, it passes through the entire city. It is the river Thames is, as it enters into the ocean, as it leaves London behind, the river Thames is found to be one of the purest rivers, not one of the purest river on the planet. Whereas Ganga is Mata, worshipped elaborately in multiple rituals. We have multiple Ganga Haratis and all that. Big Haratis. But Ganga is one of the most polluted rivers. So polluted, you have to ask Baba Ramdev. He will tell you how much pollution is there in Ganga. Amazing pollution. So this only just out of a little sadness I said these things, nothing more than that. So what I am trying to say is we have to understand the vision. We need not be so anxious about the ritual. We have to understand the vision. For example, I knew a Mahatma. I went to Rameshwaram. So in Rameshwaram, we take bath in the ocean. So the Mahatma says, you cannot enter the bath for ceremonial bath unless you are pure to begin with. Therefore, whether it is Ganga or whether it is the ceremonial bath in Rameshwaram, that Bhaskara Kshetra. So what we do is, there is a well outside. First we go to the well and take bath and then enter the Ganga or the ocean, that particular Kshetram. Take now the ceremonial bath and then come out with wet clothes. So you should not even press your towel there. Then come out, come again to the well and take bath and then use your towel. This is how we do. That kind of a sensibility when it comes to ceremonial bath in the river. So we lost all that, unfortunate. Because we are anxious to take the ceremonial dip so that our sins get washed away. And our punya, we acquire a punya, and our desires will be fulfilled. So that kind of anxiety we have. In the process, we miss the whole spirit that the river is a manifest form of God. Once I was swimming in the river, my father told me, you are beating the river with legs, you should not do that. So that kind of sensibility towards the river, any water body, not only river, any water body, it is a manifest form of Ishvara. Bhuhu apaha. So just I have said it because this kind of a message, it should go into the society. That's why I said it. Bhuhu ambhamsi, analaha, fire. So you see, even Prithvi, the Gita, in Gita also we have Prithvi. Gamavishyacha bhutani, dharayam yahamojasa. So I possess, avishya, possess or pervade or interpenetrate. That is avishya. Avishya is interpenetrate the Prithvi. I am the antaryami of the Prithvi. That is what Sri Krishna says. Therefore, even while when we look at Prithvi, we have to look at it as the manifest form of Ishvara. There is a particular worship of Shiva. It is called Parthivalinga Puja. So what we do is, this is followed in the Ganesh Puja also. In the Ganesh Puja also it is done like that. So what we do is, we bring some mud from the river bed. You go to the river and just enter into the river a little and pick up some mud from the bed. It will be very soft mud it is. Bring it up and make a Shivalingam. The shape of a Shivalinga. Shape is not very important. And even Ganesh also, if you have a wooden plank on which some rough form of Ganesha is etched, and so put this mud on that wooden form and take it out, you will get some rough form of Ganesha. That is worshipped. You don't need very vivid Ganesha with multiple colors and all that, big size and all that. That is all not only not understanding the spirit of worship, but also violation of the vidhi outright. So that is all not necessary. And then take all these Ganeshas and dump in some water body, and that gets polluted. So it is all an aberration. We have to think about it. Whatever worship you do, you have to take precaution that you are not polluting. In fact, the Vedic worship is meant for atoning the pollution which we otherwise cause. That is the purpose of Homa and all that. Anyway, so therefore, that Parthivalinga, so among all worships of Shiva, the Parthivalinga worship is considered the superior. So you take that linga made of clay then and there and worship it, do some abhishekam to that. You have to carefully do it. If you go on putting water, it will be disintegrating. So you have to carefully do, because it is very, very, very soft and it will break apart. And you carefully do worship and take that and put back in the river, the mud. That is, the job is done. This is considered superior to worship of Shivalinga, which is fixed in the form of a stone, etc. This is considered superior. This is called Parthivalinga Puja, because there Prithvi is the manifest form of Ishvara. Ashtamurti, one of the murtis. And then coming to water, you see, water is sacred. In multiple ways we worship water. Like Kumbhabhishek of a temple. There you worship Kumbha. First you worship Kumbha. You don't worship Kumbha, you worship water only. Because you cannot have water without a pot. You need to have a pot. Otherwise, how will you have water there? Put some water there means how will you put some water there? You have to put a pot and put it there. Therefore, the pot is not the thing that is getting worshipped. It is the water inside the pot that is worshipped. That's why the mantra is also about water only. So, Apo va idagum sarvam. Must have heard the mantra. Those of you who do puja, etc., or even watched the puja, so should be able to recollect the mantra. Apo va idagum, apaha is water. Apo va idagum sarvam. Vishwa bhutanyapaha. All life forms are apaha. So, prano va apaha. Life is apaha. Annam apaha. The food that we eat, it came from apaha, therefore it is also apaha. Like that, the glory of apaha, waters, is brought out in that mantra. Therefore, water is the most sacred manifest form of Ishvara. We should never ever pollute water even very remotely. We should not waste water. We should treat water as very sacred form of Ishvara. And this practice of taking a ritual bath or ceremonial bath, sacred bath in the rivers has become significant because not that there is something special in dipping the head in the water, that is not the specialty, that is not the reason. The reason why the bath is sacred, the reason is that water is the manifest form of Ishvara. Therefore, when you take a dip in the river, you are submerging yourself in the whole, in Ishvara. And you have to do it thrice. 1, 2, 3. You have to dip completely. You cannot pour it like that. You have to dip completely so that you are merged in the Ishvara, who is in the form of the river flowing. So, therefore, water is the manifest form of Ishvara. That the river itself is the manifest form. It is not necessary to have an idol of a river on the bank again. Not necessary. If you want to have it, you can have it, because river is saguna, it is not sakara. But what people, they want sakara. People want sakara. It is up to them. There is a reason for it, because sakara worship is more. It appeals to in the preliminary stage of worship. It appeals to the human mind. So when the mind is more gross, the sakara worship will be appealing. Therefore, they make a Ganga Mata Vigraham. They make and put it. They cannot put it in the river. Sometimes they put it in the river also. So first make a big idol and put it in the middle of the river. When during the summer season, when the river is very weak, and then in the rainy season there is a flood and the Vigraham is knocked off, and then say, "Oh, some bad omen." It is not bad omen. You should not put it in the flow of water in the first place, and then attribute all kinds of reasons for that bad omen. Suppose you don't like the party in power, because of these party people, the Vigraham is broken, that shows that the government is doing some mischief. Like that, throw the blame upon government. So all kinds of things they do. There is no bad omen or any such thing. It is the natural thing that has to happen. And it happened. The law of nature is there. When the water is flowing, it corrodes the base, and therefore the thing falls. So people read bad omen into that. There is no bad omen in it. So this is all superstition. We should not allow a superstition to enter into the rituals. When the ritual is vitiated by superstition, the ritual which was originally connected to the vision, so that connection with the vision gets snapped. And so now you are stuck with a ritual of which no significance is known to the person, And so many superstitions enter into it. That's why when karma is dissociated from jnanam, the karma becomes the least harm that can happen is that the karma becomes mechanical and repetitive, and it dulls the mind. Anything which is done again and again mechanically and in a repetitive way, it dulls the mind. That is the least harm that can happen when karma is dissociated from jnanam. The worst harm that can happen when karma is dissociated from jnanam is that karma is now guided by superstition. So this is how it happens. We have to be cautious about it. And then agnihi. So bhuha ambhamsi analaha, agnihi, fire. Anala is an interesting word. Navidyate alam yasya saha analaha. The fire doesn't say enough. The more fuel you add to the fire, it will consume more fuel. It will never say enough. So that's why it is called analaha. And so the fire. The fire, there is a fire before you in the adhibhuta. That is the agni. You see, you have to understand that energy is the most profound manifest form of God. Because Shakti, energy is Shakti. And that energy is the closest representative of God. The best symbol for God, closest to God, is energy. And that's why our rishis worshipped energy as the goddess, as the universal mother, the consort of Ishvara. So Ishvara, he commands the Maya Shakti, and that Maya Shakti manifests in the form of energy in the universe. Energy, looked at in a gross way, appears jada, insentient. But then there is nothing insentient in this universe. Energy is also sentient. Even a mountain is sentient. Even a river is sentient. I mean, Chetana it is. It is all Devata. So you have to look at everything in this universe as consciousness, as Chaitanyam. So even physical things are visualized as Chaitanyam. What to speak of energy? So energy is necessarily visualized as Chaitanyam. So the force of water is the Shakti of God. The force of the wind is the Shakti of the God. The power of earth has a power, it upholds all life, so that is the Shakti of God. The gravitational energy, which is space, is the Shakti of God. So like that you have to see. So all energy, in fact matter is a condensed energy only, and all energy is the symbol of God. When you understand that, then fire occupies a very special place, because of all forms of energy, fire is the most attractive and the most stunningly glorious form of energy, fire. So you see, we lose that sense of wonder. We lose it because we stopped wondering at the glory of some of these things. But if you have that heart, the devotion in you, you will wonder at the glory of fire. Fire is a very special manifest form of energy, unlike any other form of energy, fire. And so electricity is great, mechanical energy is great, gravitational energy is great, radiational energy is also great. Fire comes under radiational energy, really speaking. So it is the most potent form of energy, and therefore the rishis, they saw energy as a symbol of God, and within the field of energy they saw fire as the greatest form of energy, and therefore they have revered fire as God. The Rigveda begins with the prayer, Agnimi Ide, like that. Purohitam. Ide means I praise the glory. Ide is Uttama Purusha. I praise the glory. Whom? Agnim. Agni is the fire, the physical fire that is before you, and also Agre Nayati, who is there even before creation, Ishvara, that is Agni. And so that is the greatest prayer. And when the person is leaving the mortal frame, then the prayer again, you find it in Ishavasya Upanishad, the prayer is Agne Naya Supatharaye Asman Vishwani Deva Vayunani Vidvan Yodhyasmajjuhuranameno Bhuyishtante Nama Uktim Vidhema. That is the mantra. So Agne, O Agni Naya, please take me forward. Supatha, by the glorious path to heaven. Heaven means Atma. So, like that it goes on. Therefore, Agni is the primary altar of worship in Vedic vision. Primary altar of worship. And so, any ritual, it begins with Agni and ends with Agni. And that is the Agni in the Adhibhuta, in the universe. Then there is Agni in you. And that Agni is also manifest form of Ishvara. That is the Vaishvanara Agni. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha. The Vaishvanara is the fire which is in the form of hunger. You look at the universe, it's a wondrous vision it is. You look at the plants, they are ever hungry. Always drawing water and nutrients from the earth, absorbing the solar energy and manufacturing glucose from carbon dioxide and water. Always. It's a non-stop process. The plants and grass, trees, etc. They are hungry. The plants are ever hungry. You look at the animals, the entire activity of the animals is to get food. That is the major activity of the animals. And they are hungry. And birds, they spend the whole waking time in hunting for food. They are hungry. And even humans are like that. When a human being wants to move somewhere, he checks how far the kitchen will be from the place where I am going. And he settles that point, then only he goes. In fact, it looks to me the students of Vedanta take all kinds of precaution that the food is readily made available, and then only they study Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha. Something like it looks like that. It is as if all food is ready. Once the class is finished, the food is ready. So then only the class becomes important. Do you know this? If you conduct a public meeting in which no food is offered, if 100 people come, if you offer free food, 500 people will come. This is what the organizers have learnt in their experience. So, food has a very special attraction. All temples have become pakashalas. All temples. At one time, Shiva temples were not having anything to do with the food. They use prasadam in Shiva temple is bhasma. They give some bhasma in your hand. That is the prasadam. But now, Shiva temples, why should they lag behind when Vishnu temples have such a wonderful, glorious thing going all the time? So chakra pongali, ye pongali, wo pongali, all kinds of food they have. And so Chappan Bhog, Sri Krishna will have 56 varieties of sweets. 56 sweets he will have. One Sri Krishna function which I attended, they have served me 21 sweets. I told you, see, I will not be able to do all that. They told Swamiji, we will serve. And they served 21. I picked up one, and now you take away all the other things, then only I will do parishechanam and eat my food. I don't want all the 20 sitting there. You take away first, and then only I will proceed any further. So, therefore, temples have become pakashalas. So, this is not a very favorable development, but anyway, temple people have to take care of that. I am not a very keen temple guy, so I just do namaskar and move on. I'm not very keen about prasadam also. So it's not that you should eat prasadam. Without eating prasadam, you should not move. Okay, then there are 5 deities. Then how many prasadas you have to eat? 5 of them. So no surprise, people become diabetic. So all that is fine. So the point is, there is Vaishvanara here. I don't know why I said some of these things. So spontaneously I said it. Please take it in the right spirit. I wish that the people pick up the right point and make some changes if necessary. So that is the idea also. Anyway, Aham Vaishvanaraha. So human beings are ever hungry. And the first, that is very natural approach. The first, suppose you have a festival, whether it is religious or not so religious, the first thing that you plan is food. Like satsanga, okay. So what are the food arrangements? Like that. Many of the satsanga groups, they whatever satsanga they are doing, only Bhagavan knows. But how much satsanga they are able to do, what is that they are learning. But whether satsanga learning is there or not, socialization and multiple varieties of food enjoyment, they are certainly there. Whether there is any learning of Vedanta, we have to wait and see. These 2 aspects are well taken care of. So human nature is like that. That Vaishvanara is always waiting to take more and more food. And so aham Vaishvanaro bhutva praninam deham ashritaha. So that is Agni. That is the manifest form of God. That's why when we eat food, we offer food with mantra. Like suppose you are doing Naivedyam to God. Then what mantras you say? Om Pranaya Swaha, Om Apanaya Swaha. Like that they say. Suppose you are eating food. What mantra you will say now? Same mantra you say. No different mantra. Because even while eating food, it is an offering to God within. Vaishvanara Agni. So that vision, it purifies the mind like anything. And also that develops a respect for food. Annam brahmetiv yajanat. You won't waste food. There will be a respect for food. It is estimated that in North America, 30% of the cooked food is thrown out. Only 70% cooked food. You cook food and keep it there, 30% of it will find its way to waste basket, and only 70% will go down the throat. That is how it is estimated. Because it is a fashion to serve huge portions. It's a fashion. And you eat, and it is also fashion to leave some of it. You should not eat all of it. It is against etiquette. If you eat all of it, he is from an Indian village, that he eats all the food that is served to him. He is supposed to throw away something. So this is how they operate. It is most unfortunate. Then Vayu. Vayu is the manifest form of God. In fact, infinite reflecting in the finite. That is a model which I was discussing in one of the verses. The infinite reflecting in the finite. Finite is the body-mind. Infinite is reflecting here. So, the very gross form of that infinite, and then the most subtle form of that infinite. Most subtle form of the infinite is Atma, the Chaitanyam, which is reflecting here. And the gross form of that infinite is Vayu. That's why it is called Pratyaksham. Pratyaksham is gross. So, Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi. So, while doing pranayama, there is a meditation associated with pranayama. So, what we do is, while inhaling and exhaling, we visualize this mantra. While inhaling, mentally you have to visualize. If you say it, then the inhaling, exhaling cycle cannot fit into that. Because saying is always while exhaling. Anyway, therefore, mentally you visualize. A guided meditation also can incorporate it. So, Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi. So, while inhaling slowly And exhaling slowly, you visualize Namaste Vayo, like that you visualize. That is considered one of the most sacred upasanas, Vayu Upasana. It is, many upasanas are there. This is one of the most prominent and most powerful upasanas. So, in that sense, Vayu is a manifest form of Ishvara. That is the fourth. And fifth, Akasha, space. You see, about space, I'll give you a model. This is given by Swami Vivekananda. This is Drishtanta for meditation. Meditation illustrations they are, metaphors for meditation. So, you visualize a fish which is happily moving around in the ocean. Fish is at home in ocean. Fish is not afraid of the ocean. Ocean is infinite, but fish is very much at home in that infinite. Similarly, you be at home in the infinite. The infinite is the space. So you close the eyes and visualize the space around you, and then the open space, and then go to the infinite depths of the galactical space, all the space. And so you visualize that space. That space is Ishvara. So I am engulfed by the universal presence of space all around me, and that is Ishvara. I am very much in the lap of Ishvara. I am engulfed all around by Ishvara. So that is the vision, Akasha Dhyanam. It is also considered very liberating and purifying of the heart. So, therefore, Akasha. In fact, the Akasha is considered the body line of Ishvara. When you can look at the Brahmanda as the physical form of God, the cosmic form of the God, then Akasha becomes the body line. So that's why the Shruti says, Akasha Shariram Brahma, Taittiriya Upanishad. So Akasha is the body line. That is the idea when it is said, Shivaha Digambaraha. Lord Shiva is Digambara. Digambara doesn't mean naked. Digambara is not naked. That is a bit weird. That is not the idea. So Digambara means the one who has the space as his body. Ambara as the outer cover. Space is the outer cover. Because the entire universe is contained within space. And the space is the outer form, outer cover of Ishvara. If Ishvara were to have a physical body, then space is his outer skin. That is how it is visualized. Therefore, Akasha, in fact, Akasha is not void. We count Akasha as one of the important elements because it is the manifest form of Ishvara. It is not a physical form, obviously, and it is certainly not Akara, but it is a form that you can visualize with your mind. That is the upasana, you know. So, Akasha. So you have to visualize that a fish example you take into your mind. Look at, you visualize the fish illustration and then apply it to yourself. I am in the infinite space, which is Ishvara, like the fish in the ocean. It's a beautiful upasana. So these are 5. And then another 3. Aharnathaha himamshuhu puman. Aharnathaha is the sun. Adityanam aham Vishnuhu. Jyotisham raviram shuman. Like that Sri Krishna says in Gita. So, just I am looking at the meaning of the word puman. Whether he has given any special meaning. I remember the meaning. Okay. Anyway, so Aharnathaha, the Lord of the daytime, that is sun. So sun is the manifest form of Ishvara. In fact, the Vedic sages, they worshipped Ishvara in fire, which is near, and the sun, which is far, yet visible to the eye, and also in water. These are the 3 primary altars. In that order, first most prominent is fire. Second place occupied by sun. and water is the third. So you stand before the rising sun, and you should not make it mechanical. You have to take a particular precaution that the upasana doesn't become mechanical. So when you are looking at the sun, you should not look at the sun from the memory of earlier experience. You should not allow, because the same sun I am seeing day after day, suppose if you say that, then the spirit of upasana is gone. It is not the same sun. There is nothing like same. Present is eternally new, it is. Now is always new, eternally new. Timelessly fresh it is. The sun is like that, timelessly fresh. Not that the same sun. So when you look at the sun, you should be able to wonder at the glory of the sun. That amazement at the glory of the rising sun as the manifest form of Ishvara is a hallmark of devotion. That is how devotion operates. So devotion is not the physical movement. Devotion is the wonder, the amazement that you can feel in your heart. That is the devotion. And so you may want to look at the rising sun and offer a crisp prayer filled with the devotion and freshness of the mind. The freshness of the present moment, wonder and love. That is the essence of a prayer to the rising sun. Because it is a marvelous prayer, it is. It is very simple. There is no difficulty at all. And that's why it occupies the place of Nitya Karma. That is the Nitya Karma. But don't look for any benefits and advantages, because this kind of a prayer, it doesn't come with a tag of the fulfillment of desires and all that. You don't find it in that. In fact, Nitya Karma is defined as that karma for which there is no phalashruti. That is how the definition, Mimamsaka's definition it is. Therefore, this is Nitya Karma, thus prayer to the rising sun. In fact, if you have some illness, you see, one day the body has to fall. First you have to understand that. You should not look for some quick fixes. Oh, illness, so if I stand before the sun and pray, this illness, I need not take tablet, etc. Is that like, you should not look at it like a quick fix. You have to look at it as an occasion to rise above the body consciousness, to rise above the weight, the psychological weight of the illness. You want to rise above that. So for that purpose, whatever may happen to the illness, it will happen. So you better look at it like that. So further, when you feel that you have a particular illness, you look at, you face the rising sun. Don't ever look directly towards the sun. Just in a general way, face the rising sun and pray. That Gayatri or Aditya Hridayam, a crisp, simple prayer. Need not be elaborately hours together or half an hour, 1 hour, it becomes difficult. Very crisp, 5 minutes maximum, or even maybe another 2 minutes. So Gayatri Mantra or Aditya Hridayam, they don't take more than 5 minutes. And Gayatri Mantra, if you chant 108 times, it may take 8 to 10 minutes. That is how it takes. And so you pray, standing firmly after bath. So if you do it day after day, as far as possible, you should be able to overcome the illness, or if not the illness, the psychological burden of illness you will be able to overcome. You see, in any illness, the physical suffering is only 10%. 90% is emotional suffering only. The physical pain is only 10%. So that physical pain you can take care with medicine. The emotional suffering associated with illness is entirely needless. It is a direct product of obsessive attachment with the physical body. And therefore, so the sun worship, the prayer to sun, could be very helpful in overcoming some of these problems of the mind. Then Himamshuhu, the moon, during the night. The sun plays the role during the day, The Jyoti means lamp, of this day is the sun, the Jyoti of the night is the moon. And moon's glory, so I can go on describing the moon's glory. There is a lot of poetry also associated with moon's glory. Chandraha. Shri Rama is called Shri Rama Chandraha. Shri Rama Chandraha, Shrita Parijataha, like that. Even Shri Krishna is called Shri Krishna Chandraha. Moon worship. The moment you look at moon, you may want to say a prayer. With the freshness of the present moment and with the intensity of love, you may want to say a prayer to the moon. Simple prayer. You may say Om Somaya Namaha. You may say that. Or Om Somaya Swaha. You may say like that. If you say it with a swaram, Om Somaya Swaha, that is how it sounds. And there are some mantras, hymns about Chandra. You have to learn the hymn and you may say that like Navo, Navo, Bhavati, etc. You may say a prayer. It is a very liberating and uplifting it is. So Himam Shuhu. You see, the whole universe is the temple. Now, you do not have the hassle of running around temples and standing in the long queues and this and that. And then come back from India and complain that about the temple. So it is not being done properly there. In Kashi, why they do like that? So all kinds of complaints people have. I say, who asked you to go there? So, if you have to, either you accept it and have the pilgrimage peacefully, or you have the pilgrimage in your own heart or in your own home, etc. You have to accept. Everything you should be able to accept. That acceptance should be there. If you do not have acceptance with a sense of rejection and resentment, if you go to a pilgrimage center, you will be put off a lot. You will get a cultural shock. So you should have plenty of acceptance in you. Otherwise, your heart is the temple. Heart is the temple. So Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati. So that is enough about moon. And then Puman. Puman, there are two kinds of meanings are given. You must have heard the meaning. Puman means the individual, Jiva. Jiva is also manifest form of Ishvara, which is fine. But here we are talking of Upasana, you know. Jiva is manifest form of Ishvara. There is no issue about it. Jivena Atmana Anupravishya. But that is a Nirguna Jnanam. But in the context of Upasana, Puman is explained as Somayaji. That is the meaning given for Puman. I was looking for that meaning. That is how I learned when I was younger. I was looking for that meaning in the Tika, but I could not locate it. I did not have time to go through all that. I will check. You also check. Puman is Somayaji. Means a Vaidika who has performed Somayaga. A big Vedic ritual it is. So that Somayaji, he represents the glory of Vedic karma kanda. So it's a very elaborate karma it is. And so in which fire is worshipped for 5 days continuously. And so it is a difficult karma. And so he has performed it. And so he is shining with the glory of that karma. And therefore he represents the glory of Agni, which itself is the manifest form of Ishvara. Therefore the Somayaji is a manifest form of Ishvara. That is the only Sakara. Everything else is Nirakara. These are the 8 forms of Ishvara. And now the third line says, Nanyat kinchana vidyate vimurushatam. Nothing is left now. The entire universe is covered. Yasmat parasmat vibhoho. That is Panchame Ekavachanam. So other than the Paramatma, there is nothing in this universe. The entire universe is now covered. If you cover 8 forms, you have covered the entire universe. Nothing is left out. Panchabhutas, the sun and the moon, and the Somayaji. So you may visualize these 8 forms as manifest forms of Ishvara. Throughout the day, you are in the communion with God. And so the presence of Ishvara, what they call Sannidhi, is always with you. That is the verse. Then final verse, Phalashruti it is called. Generally Phalashruti is, you hear such Phalashrutis, Putrarthi labhate putram, Dhanarthi labhate dhanam. So, Mercedes-Benz car arthi labhate Mercedes-Benz car, like that you hear. Things like that. There, this you should not take them literally. They are not meant literally also. They are only meant for people in the very initial stage of religiosity. They are being encouraged. Come on, whatever you want, you take it from God. The idea is you avoid all desires. If you cannot avoid desires, then present these desires before God. Don't present them before man. Don't ask other people, I want this, I want that. You ask Ishvara. And that is how you enter into the kingdom of God, through a desire. And eventually you will be advised to give up that desire. It is called Gudajifika Nyayam. Gudajifika Nyayam means when a person is having fever, he has to drink that decoction of the black pepper decoction, which is very harsh decoction. It is very, the mouth will burn. It is like putting fire into the mouth. You must be knowing that decoction. So that you have to drink. And the child is not willing to drink it. And then the mother offers, I will give you jaggery guda. I will give it to you. She shows it. She won't give it first. She shows it. I will give you this if you drink this decoction. And anyway she is forcing him. He has to drink anyway. He is suffering from fever. And so, but this attraction of the guda is put there. Now he drinks it. You know what happens then? She will take away the guda and put in the box and put at a higher place. She won't give it to him. That is the Gudajifika Nyaya. So Putrarthi labhate putra means that. Come on, what is that you want? Come on, worship God. That is the idea. Really, I am not exaggerating. Just to encourage. Whereas in the context of Daksinamurti Stotram, certainly you don't need any encouragement. Because many only evolved people will come to this Stotram. Therefore you don't find any such encouragement in this verse. It only summarizes the spirit of Vedanta. Like what? You do Shravanam and do Mananam and Nididhyasanam. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. That is the primary means of self-knowledge. Atmava are drashtavya shrotavyo mantavyo nididhyasitavyaha. Life without search for the truth of the self is a wasted life. Not only a wasted life, life without the search for the truth is a life full of misery and conflict. So, there must be search for truth in life. Atmava are drashtavyaha means that. Then how to go about it? How to realize the self? Shrotavyo, mantavyo, nididhyasitavyaha. Shravana, manana, nididhyasana are the sakshat sadhana. It is called primary sadhana. And karma yoga, bhakti yoga, they are all secondary sadhanas. The primary sadhana is also called sakshat sadhanam. Is shravanam and nididhyasana. That is the pursuit. And what is the ultimate goal that you reach? Sarvatma bhava. That is called another name for moksha. Moksha is not some exotic thing that you go here and there, etc. That is not the moksha. Moksha is, you see, what is your experience? I am. That is, I feel the existence. And that feeling of existence is in the form of I am. And then there is the world. That is also the feeling of existence. You feel. So you feel flower is, you feel it. Feel it, sense it. You sense it or you feel it. You feel that mountain is, you feel the world is, like that you feel. So once again, when you say there is, that is the feeling of existence. existence of multiple names and forms, but still feeling of existence. Therefore now existence is divided into two. Existence which is myself and existence which is the other. This division of existence is because of the mind. It is the mind which divides the existence. And you have to overcome due to ignorance. Mind, another name for mind is ignorance. Another name. So you have to overcome that ignorance which is the mind, and so that is the jnana. When you overcome, then what happens? Nothing special will happen. You will remain where you are. Only thing is, now you will feel all existence is myself. That is how you feel. All that exists is myself. Atma va idagum sarvam. Idam sarvam, all this, why indeed? Atma, myself. Therefore, there is nothing other than myself. Everything, all existence is myself. This is the sarvatma bhava, which I have explained in big detail in one of the verses. That is the goal. That is the last verse. You may want to say, so I have reserved only 5 minutes for the last verse. I have put all my energies in the first 9 verses. I expected in the very beginning itself that I will not be able to take Mauna Vyakhya, and I did not plan it. I just briefly mentioned it in between. I did not plan it. So, this is what I thought on day 1. That is how it worked out by God's grace. So we will say the verse one time, and then I will conclude the series of talks. Of course, I thank you very much for the courtesy of your attention all these days. So now we will say the verse. Sarvatmattvamiti sphuti kritamidam yasmadamushmyustave tenasya shravanat tadarthamananat dhyanachya sankirtanat sarvatmatva mahavibhuti sahitam syadishwaratvam svataha siddhyet punarashtadha parinatanchaishwaryamavyahatam. So the word-to-word meaning is given. Please go through that. I have covered every aspect of it is covered. Nothing is left out. So please don't feel that I have left out the last verse. Don't feel like that. So if something is indeed left out, word-to-word explanation, etc., you take it as homework. You do some work at home. So thank you once again. So I had a nice hospitality with all of you. I appreciate everything. And of course I am grateful to Shri Vijay Kapoor ji also for all the organization. And all our friends like Kumar, etc., I am of course thankful to all of them. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Krishnarpanamastu.